We've never been included in the Farm Acts or anything related to farming, which we are farmers though.
Bobby Goodson built a name in the darkest swamps of North Carolina, where one wrong move could swallow a machine whole and end a day in seconds. For years, he looked like the man who could outwork anything, outlast anything, and survive anything. But away from the cameras, another battle was unfolding, one filled with addiction, violence, financial collapse, and a private darkness fans never saw coming. Then, almost overnight, swamp loggers disappeared, Bobby faded from the spotlight, and rumors started spreading about what was really happening behind closed doors. Now, the latest updates on Bobby Goodson's life have left longtime fans stunned by what became of the man who once ruled the swamp. The rise of Bobby Goodson. For 4 seasons, millions of viewers watched Bobby Goodson and his crew drag massive trees out of swamps that most people would not walk through, let alone work in. The show was called Swamp Loggers, and it turned a 4th-generation timberman from North Carolina into a reality television star. Bobby was tough and fair, the kind of boss who would make you work hard all day and then buy you a drink at the end of it. He had a faith in God that he was not afraid to talk about, and a smile that made you believe everything was going to be okay. But behind the success and the television cameras, Bobby Goodson was carrying a weight that no one could see. The man who made swamp logging look easy was fighting battles that had nothing to do with mud or machinery. Bobby Goodson was born in 1964 in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Logging was in his blood. His family had been cutting timber for 4 generations, and he grew up around chainsaws and logging trucks the way other kids grew up around bicycles and baseball bats. The work was dangerous and dirty, but it was honest. He learned early that the forest gives you nothing for free. You have to fight for every log, and even then, the swamp might still win. He left the logging life briefly to earn a degree in graphic communications from Chowan College. The education gave him skills that most loggers never have, but the pull of the family trade was too strong. He came back to the woods, and in 1986, he started his own company. The early years were hard. He was young and unknown, and the established loggers did not take him seriously. But Bobby was stubborn. He kept working, kept building, and kept proving that he belonged. In 1996, he made a decision that would define his career. He shifted into swamp logging, a specialized type of timber harvesting that involved extracting wood from waterlogged terrain that most loggers considered too dangerous. The swamps were treacherous. The ground could swallow a bulldozer whole. The trees fell in directions you did not expect. But the timber in those swamps was valuable, and Bobby figured out how to get it out. He founded Goodson's All-Terrain Logging, a company headquartered in Jacksonville that would eventually employ 17 people at its peak. The business grew slowly, but it grew steadily. The call from television came in 2009. Discovery Channel had been looking for a logging show, something authentic, something that showed the real challenges of the industry. They found Bobby and his crew, and they liked what they saw. The show was called Swamp Loggers.
If logging does not succeed, there's a lot of money that's going to quit flowing in this country.
And it premiered on June 15, 2009. Unlike other reality shows that manufactured drama for the cameras, Swamp Loggers stuck to the truth. The challenges were real. The bad weather, the poor road conditions, the equipment failures, and the uncertainty with lumber buyers and sawmills were not staged. The crew did not need writers to invent problems. The swamp provided plenty on its own. The show ran for 4 seasons, producing over 37 episodes before ending on January 10, 2012. The cast included Bobby as the owner, his wife Lori Goodson as the office manager,
Y'all keep watching, and maybe we'll get that big track. Y'all pray for us.
His son Justin as a part owner and foreman, and a crew of drivers and operators who became familiar faces to millions of viewers. Names like Dave Mueller, Simitrio Ruiz, Durley Hicks, and Joe Monkey Nagy became part of the show's fabric. Viewers loved the camaraderie and the danger and the sense that they were watching something real. The financial success that followed was significant. Bobby Goodson's net worth was estimated at $3 million as of 2021. He reportedly earned between $100,000 and $150,000 per episode of Swamp Loggers, and his forestry company generated over $1 million in annual revenue. The man who had started with nothing now had a successful business and a hit television show. In 2009, the same year his show premiered, Bobby was awarded the Southeastern Wood Producers Logger of the Year award. The honor recognized his professionalism, his efficient logging practices, and his positive impact on the industry. It was validation from his peers, the people who knew the work best. Swamp Loggers brought public attention to the challenges that loggers face every day. The show addressed issues like accidents, dangers, financial pressures, and industry instability. Bobby was credited with being the face of that honesty. He faced every challenge with a positive attitude that came from his faith in God and his determination to succeed. He was not a manufactured television personality. He was the real thing. But the cameras did not follow him home at night. They did not capture the arguments or the stress or the private struggles that were tearing at him. The man who seemed to have it all was hiding something, and when the truth finally came out, the fans who had loved him for 4 seasons were shocked. The darkness no one saw. The Bobby Goodson that millions of viewers watched on television was calm, capable, and in control. He faced down flooded swamps and broken machinery with the kind of confidence that made people believe nothing could rattle him. But the man on screen was not the whole story. Behind the smile and the easy laugh was a person who had been fighting battles long before the cameras ever showed up. The darkness in Bobby Goodson's life was something he kept hidden from the public. And the things he did in those dark years were so troubling that even he was not sure he could ever be forgiven. The trouble started early. As a young boy, Bobby fell in with older kids who introduced him to things that no child should have been messing with. By the 5th grade, he had already been exposed to alcohol. Most kids that age were worried about spelling tests and recess. Bobby was already thinking about when he'd get his next drink. Looking back on his life, he admitted that he could not remember a single day that he had gone without drinking or using some kind of substance. The addiction had its hooks in him before he was old enough to understand what addiction even was. He met Lori when he was 14 years old. She was young too, and she had her own struggles. The two of them connected in a way that felt electric at first and destructive later. The relationship was volatile from the very beginning. They fought constantly, and neither of them knew how to back down. Bobby admitted that when he got angry, he did not hold back. Lori said the same thing about herself. If he pushed, she pushed back. If he screamed, she screamed louder. If he used ugly words, she was right up in his face doing the same. They brought out the worst in each other, and neither of them knew how to stop. Bobby learned early that words could hurt as much as physical pain. He would deliberately say whatever he thought would wound Lori the deepest. He knew her insecurities, her fears, and the places where she was most vulnerable, and he went after them without mercy. Lori later said that the worst thing Bobby ever told her was that he did not love her anymore. The words made her physically sick. There were days when she could not even get out of bed. The marriage had become a battlefield, and both of them were losing. They had their first child, Justin, when they were 16 years old. They were barely old enough to drive, and suddenly they were responsible for a human life. The pressure made everything worse. They married 5 years later, but the wedding itself was a sign of how broken things had become. Before the wedding, Bobby's brother even joked to family members that the marriage would end badly within a year. The family already knew how unstable the relationship had become. However, one night, everything changed. Bobby came home heavily intoxicated, which was not unusual. Lori found him passed out and tried to wake him up. But this time, something shifted. He suddenly became aggressive. Lori later recalled that he physically confronted her, and the situation escalated quickly. The situation became so frightening that she could barely breathe or defend herself. Thankfully, the phone rang. It was Lori's father. The interruption seemed to break the tension, and Bobby suddenly stepped away. He answered the phone as if nothing unusual had happened. He spoke calmly with his father-in-law, sounding completely normal. Then he looked at Lori and said, "It's your dad." She forced herself through the conversation while Bobby eventually drifted back to sleep beside her, seemingly disconnected from the seriousness of what had just happened. The next morning, Bobby woke up to a scene of destruction. Doors were knocked off their hinges. There were holes in the walls. The television was destroyed. The entire house was in disarray, and he could not remember any of it. He did not know what he had done. The fog of alcohol had erased everything. He looked at the wreckage around him, and something finally clicked. He made up his mind right then. He could not live like this anymore. He realized that he could have hurt Lori. He could have done anything in that state, and he would not have even remembered it the next day. Something had to change, or things were going to end very badly. The following Sunday, Bobby and Lori went to church together. It was not something they did regularly, but something was different this time. Bobby gave his life to Christ that day, and from that very moment, the alcohol and illicit substances were gone. Bobby later revealed that the addiction that had held him since childhood finally released its grip. But the damage had already been done. The years of drinking and fighting and violence had left scars that would never fully heal. And the show that had made him famous was about to end for reasons that had nothing to do with the swamp. The reason his show ended. For 4 seasons, Swamp Loggers had been a reliable hit for Discovery Channel. Viewers tuned in every week to watch Bobby Goodson and his crew battle mud, machinery, and the impossible conditions of the North Carolina swamps. But behind the scenes, something tragic was happening that no amount of television magic could fix. The economy was collapsing, and the timber industry was falling apart with it. The same financial crisis that was wiping out retirement accounts and home values across America was also destroying the market for hardwood logs. Mills were closing, buyers were disappearing, and Bobby Goodson, who had spent his entire life learning how to survive in the swamp, was not sure he could survive this. The trouble began slowly with a few mills at first, but then the closures picked up speed. One after another, the facilities that had been buying Bobby's logs for years shut their doors. Some went bankrupt. Others just stopped answering the phone. The region that had once supported dozens of timber buyers was suddenly reduced to a single mill that was still accepting wood. That meant Bobby had no leverage. The one remaining buyer could set whatever price they wanted, and Bobby had to take it or leave it. The math was brutal. A single rejected load could cost up to $1,000 in lost fuel and wages. That was money Bobby could not afford to lose. His weekly operational expenses ran over $50,000. During the worst periods, his company was losing nearly $4,000 every single day. The wood stacked up in his yard, unsold and rotting, while his bills kept coming. He said on the show that he did not like to see wood stacked up like that because it meant he was not making any money. The words were simple, but the desperation behind them was real. Bobby tried to explain the situation to his crew in terms they could understand. He told them that the wood industry was just like the stock market. It changed from day to day, and there was no way to predict which way it would go. In another episode, he gathered his men and delivered the kind of speech that no boss ever wants to give. He said that they were in perilous times, and that if the cost of getting the logs out ever exceeded what the logs were worth, they would have to stop. He did not say the words "shut down," but everyone in that room knew what he meant. The numbers told the story. 75 loads per week was considered the break-even point, the bare minimum needed to cover expenses. Anything below that, and Bobby was losing money. 100 loads triggered a small bonus for the crew, plus a company barbecue cooked by the loader operator, Dave Mueller. Those barbecues became a symbol of hope on the show, a reminder that there were still good days mixed in with the bad. But as the economy worsened, the good days became harder to find. The crew itself was struggling. Milton Bo Malpass, one of the truck drivers, had to undergo emergency gallbladder surgery. The procedure was successful, but the recovery took months. His absence left a hole in the operation, and the other drivers had to pick up the slack. The show documented his return to work, and fans cheered when he finally came back with a clean bill of health. But the strain on everyone was visible. The network tried to put a positive spin on things. In an August 2011 press release, Discovery Channel described swamp loggers as pulp nonfiction, a clever play on words that made the show sound edgy and exciting. But no amount of marketing could change the reality on the ground. The fourth season featured the mill shutdown as a central plot point, with truckers clashing over stolen loads and tensions running high. A driver named EJ quit over a weekend, leaving his truck up for grabs. Joy, another driver, stepped into the new rig, while her brother Bo finally returned to work after months of recovery. Dave worked to redeem his barbecue cooking reputation at a pig roast competition. The show was still entertaining, but the desperation underneath was impossible to miss. When the fourth season ended, there was no announcement of a fifth. The show simply stopped. No cancellation notice, no press release, no final episode that tied up all the loose ends. Swamp loggers went on hiatus, and as months passed with no news, fans began to assume the worst. By 2012, it was clear that the show was not coming back. The economic collapse had claimed another victim, and this time, the victim was a reality television show about logging. But the end of the show was not the end of Bobby Goodson's problems. The cameras stopped rolling, but the financial pressures did not. The business that had been his life's work was crumbling, and the worst news was still ahead. The tragic collapse of the business. For 37 years, Bobby Goodson had done one thing. He had cut trees out of swamps that other loggers would not touch, hauled them to mills that were always on the verge of closing, and somehow kept his crew paid and his equipment running. He had survived recessions and hurricanes and the constant threat of injury or death that came with the job. But in May of 2022, he sat down with his wife, Lori, in front of a camera, looked into the lens, and told the world that it was over. The logging business was shutting down. The announcement sent shockwaves through the timber industry, and the men who had worked for Bobby for years were suddenly facing a future they had not planned for. The video was simple. Bobby and Lori stood in their kitchen, speaking directly to the camera like they were talking to old friends. There was no dramatic music, no fancy editing, no reality show production crew. Just two people telling the truth. Bobby explained that the business was no longer profitable under current market conditions. He had not seen a way out, and after months of trying to find one, he had decided to close the doors. The primary reason was fuel costs. Bobby's trucks were running 700 to 800 miles per day, and they averaged about 5 miles per gallon. Every time the price of diesel went up, his profit margin went down, and the prices kept going up. There was no relief in sight. He could not pass the costs along to his customers because the mills were struggling too. Everyone was squeezed, and no one had any room to give. Labor shortages made everything worse. Bobby could not find enough qualified drivers to keep his trucks rolling. The ones he had were working double shifts just to keep up, and they were burning out. Trucking capacity was a constant problem. Equipment costs were rising dramatically. The same machines that had once cost $100,000 were now going for twice that amount, if you could find them at all. The math that had worked for nearly 4 decades no longer added up. Bobby made a point of saying that he had not talked to a single logger in the last few years who was actually making money. The ones who were still in business were barely hanging on, and many of them were just waiting for the right moment to get out. He decided to be the one who spoke up. He put the timber industry above his own privacy, sharing his struggles publicly so that others might understand what was happening. He wanted to be a warning, a canary in the coal mine, for an industry that was heading toward disaster. The response from the logging community was immediate. Men who had been cutting timber for decades reached out to thank him for his honesty. They told him that they were experiencing the same thing. Some had already closed their own businesses. Others were planning to do so. Bobby's announcement was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. All 17 of his employees lost their positions when the company closed. These were not just workers. They were men who had been with Bobby for years, some for decades. They had celebrated births and mourned deaths together. They had pulled each other out of mud holes and fixed broken machinery in the pouring rain. Now they were looking for work in an industry that was shrinking by the day. Bobby had to sell off all of his company equipment, the trucks and loaders and skidders that had been the tools of his trade for a lifetime. Watching them go was like watching pieces of himself drive away. The warning that Bobby issued was meant for policymakers as much as for the public. He said that if nothing drastic happened, there would be a severe shortage of loggers. He reminded anyone who would listen that loggers are where it all begins. Without them, there are no sawmills, no lumber yards, no home construction, and no paper mills. The entire forest products industry depends on the men and women who go into the woods every day to cut trees. When the loggers start failing, a lot of other people start feeling the pain. Bobby Goodson had spent his life in the swamp. He had wrestled logs through mud that could swallow a bulldozer. He had kept his crew safe through storms and breakdowns and all the other disasters that come with the job. But he could not fight the economy. He could not make fuel prices come down. He could not force the mills to pay more for the wood that was costing him more to produce. The swamp had finally beaten him, not with mud or falling trees, but with simple arithmetic. The announcement marked the end of an era. Goodson's all-terrain logging. The company that had been featured on a national television show for 4 seasons was no more. Bobby and Lori had sacrificed their privacy to warn the industry. Whether anyone was listening remained to be seen. Bobby Goodson is still standing, and the question everyone wants answered is the same. Where is he now? And what is he doing with his life? Where is Bobby Goodson now? The business is gone. The equipment has been sold. The trucks that once hauled hundreds of loads of timber through the North Carolina swamps are now in someone else's hands. But Bobby Goodson is still here. He is alive. and he is no longer operating a logging business. The man who spent 37 years cutting trees out of places that most people would not even walk through has finally set down his chainsaw. The question that fans have been asking since the closure was announced is simple. Where is he now, and what is he doing with his life? The Goodson All-Terrain Logging Facebook page still gets regular updates as of mid-2022. Bobby and Lori use the platform to stay connected with the fans who supported them through the television years and the difficult transition that followed. They post pictures and share memories, and occasionally offer their thoughts on the state of the timber industry. The page is not as active as it once was, but it is still alive, a small digital reminder of the business that used to be. Bobby has confirmed that the show will not come back. Swamp Loggers is over. There will be no reunion special, no revival season, no return to the swamp for one last haul. The decision was not easy, but it was final. Reruns continue to air on Quest networks, introducing new viewers to the crew and the challenges they faced. But for Bobby, that chapter of his life is closed. In recent updates, Bobby has appeared visibly worn and exhausted. The stress of the business closure and decades of physical labor have taken a toll that no amount of rest can fully repair. His face is lined, and his eyes carry the weight of everything he has been through. The man who once seemed invincible in the swamp now looks like someone who has been fighting a long war and is not sure who won. He is not sick, at least not that he has said publicly. He is just tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from giving everything you have to something and watching it slip away anyway. His wife, Lori, continues to support him. Their marriage, which nearly fell apart in those dark early years, survived the worst of it and remained intact. They have been through more together than most couples could endure, and somehow they are still together. The closure of the business tested them, but it did not break them. The family legacy of 4 generations of loggers ended with the 2022 closure. Bobby's father logged, his grandfather logged, his great-grandfather logged. The chain stretched back more than 100 years, and Bobby was supposed to be the one who passed it down. But there was no one to pass it to. His son, Justin, who served as part owner and foreman of the company, was also displaced when the business closed. The young man who had grown up in the swamp, who had learned the trade from his father and his father before him, suddenly had to find a new career. The legacy that had spanned 4 generations ended with a kitchen table announcement on YouTube. Bobby continues to speak publicly about the severe shortage of loggers facing the industry. He uses his platform to warn anyone who will listen that the current model is not sustainable. The costs are too high. The regulations are too burdensome. The mills are too few. And the young people who might have once considered a career in logging are choosing other paths. He says that when loggers start failing, a lot of other people start feeling the pain. The entire timber supply chain begins with the men and women who go into the woods every day. If they cannot survive, neither can anyone else. Bobby Goodson is not the kind of man who sits still for long. The swamp is in his blood, and the blood does not change just because the business is gone. He is still watching the industry. He is still talking to loggers who are struggling. He is still hoping that someone in power will listen before it is too late. Would you like to see Bobby Goodson make a comeback to television? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates.